1984 by George Orwell, first published in 1949, is one of the most influential and haunting dystopian novels of the 20th century. Set in a totalitarian society ruled by the party, it presents a chilling vision of a world where individual freedom is non-existent and every aspect of life is under constant surveillance. In this oppressive world, the government controls not only the actions of its citizens but also their thoughts, memories, and even language. Through the protagonist Winston Smith, Orwell explores themes of power, truth, and identity, painting a bleak picture of the consequences of unchecked governmental authority. The novel serves as both a warning about the dangers of totalitarianism and a profound commentary on the importance of personal freedom, critical thought, and the ability to question authority. Its exploration of surveillance, propaganda, and the manipulation of truth remains strikingly relevant in today's world, making 1984 a timeless classic. In 1984 by George Orwell, a dystopian future society is described, governed by an all-powerful totalitarian regime. Society is under the complete control of the state, which interferes in every aspect of the citizens' lives. In this world, there is no freedom or privacy, and the people are entirely at the mercy of an authoritarian party. The government is led by a party called INGSOC, English Socialism, which maintains its absolute power and control through strict, unceasing surveillance. The party is led by a dictatorial figure known as Big Brother. While it is unclear whether Big Brother is a real person or merely a symbol, he is omnipresent. His images and slogans, such as "Big Brother is watching you," are seen everywhere. Big Brother is portrayed as the infallible ruler and protector of the people, whose surveillance and control are considered necessary to maintain order and security. The term Big Brother has become synonymous with all-encompassing surveillance and state control. In this totalitarian society, every individual's life is determined by the party. There is no private sphere left, no personal freedom, and the state monitors every action, every word, and even the thoughts of the people. The so-called thought police ensure that any dissenting opinions or disobedient behavior are harshly punished. Any attempt to oppose the party is seen as treason and immediately suppressed. Citizens live in constant fear of the party and its power. INGSOC has succeeded in keeping the people in total submission through a combination of propaganda, indoctrination, and psychological manipulation. One of the party's most powerful weapons is its control over language through newspeak, a new language designed to make the expression of resistance or free thought nearly impossible. By limiting vocabulary, the ability to formulate critical or subversive thoughts is systematically restricted. The government in 1984 has not only restricted the physical freedom of the people, but has also eradicated their mental independence. It controls the past by continuously altering historical facts to support the current party line and erasing any memory of a time before the party took power. The Ministry of Truth, whose task is to carry out these manipulations of the past, is a central instrument of control. Total surveillance and absolute obedience to the state are not a choice but a necessity in the society of 1984. The individual exists solely in the service of the party, and any form of individuality or personal expression is seen as a threat. 1984 serves as a chilling warning about the dangers of a regime that secures its power by total control over the lives of its citizens. Orwell's vision of a dystopian society paints a grim picture of a possible future, showing the destructive consequences of a totalitarian state. In the world of 1984, surveillance and control are omnipresent and one of the central pillars of the totalitarian regime. The government, led by the INGSOC party, employs extensive methods to monitor the citizens around the clock and secure its absolute power. One of the key technologies used for surveillance is the so-called telescreens. These devices are not only used to deliver state propaganda to the people, but also to constantly observe them. The telescreens are bidirectional devices, allowing the party not only to monitor the citizens, but also to allow citizens to be monitored at any time. Every room, workplace, and even public spaces are equipped with these devices, so people never know for sure if they're being watched. This all-encompassing surveillance ensures that the citizens' lives are constantly under the threat of being discovered and punished. The constant presence of surveillance makes privacy an illusion. The concept of privacy no longer exists because the regime has systematically eradicated every form of personal independence or retreat from the party's control. The state intrudes into the most intimate areas of life, and people are always aware that they are being watched. This leads to a state of self-censorship, where citizens control their thoughts, words, and actions to ensure they do not defy the party. This constant pressure has a debilitating effect on individual thought and action. However, surveillance goes even further, encompassing not just the behavior and words of people, but also their thoughts. In the world of 1984, there is the Thought Police, an organization responsible for detecting and punishing deviant thoughts. Any form of subversive or rebellious thinking is considered a thought crime and is a serious offense. It is not enough to be outwardly loyal to the party. Even the innermost thoughts must align with the party's ideology. This creates an atmosphere of constant fear and mistrust, where no one can be sure what they are allowed to think or what is considered an acceptable opinion. This ubiquitous surveillance and control create a society in which citizens are controlled not only by their outward actions, but also by their thoughts and inner beliefs. There is no escape from the regime, no opportunity to relax in a private space or free thought. The total surveillance leads to a mental destruction, where people monitor themselves and erase any spark of resistance or individuality in order not to fall victim to the vengeance of the thought police. The loss of privacy and the constant pressure of surveillance ensure the complete subjugation of the individual to the power of the party, further emphasizing the central theme of Orwell's 1984, the destruction of personal freedom and total control over society. Winston Smith is the protagonist of 1984 and a complex character who reflects the suppressed desire for freedom and individuality in a world dominated by totalitarian control. Winston works at the Ministry of Truth, one of the central institutions of the state, which is responsible for manipulating the past to align it with the current party line. In this role, Winston's task is to falsify historical documents and alter records so they reflect the party's lies and propaganda. The Ministry of Truth symbolizes total control over history, and Winston's work serves to maintain the illusion of an infallible and unchanging party. Despite his official role in the Ministry of Truth, Winston is deeply disillusioned with the party and the dictatorial regime. He has a strong aversion to the omnipresent surveillance and control that dictates his life and realizes the lies that the party spreads. Deep down, he yearns for truth and justice, even though he knows that any form of rebellion against the party comes with severe consequences. Winston feels trapped in a world where there is no real truth, as the party continuously alters reality to fit its own interests. Winston begins to fight against the system when he turns to a quiet rebellion, rejecting the suppression and brainwashing of the party. The first step in this process is his secret keeping of a journal, which he starts at the beginning of the novel. This act is an act of rebellion, as it is against the law for citizens to write down their thoughts. The journal symbolizes Winston's attempt to preserve his own truth in a world where even thinking for oneself is controlled. His resistance grows when he begins a relationship with Julia, a colleague. Julia and Winston share a passion for what is deemed forbidden, the pursuit of personal freedom and the rejection of the total control of the party. Through Julia, Winston realizes that he is not alone in his despair and desire for change, which further motivates him to continue fighting against the system. However, Winston is also deeply affected by the party's all-powerful presence. As the novel progresses, it becomes clear that his efforts to resist the regime leave him with little hope of success. The party is omnipresent and all-powerful, and Winston's attempts to defy it ultimately lead him into a trap from which there is no escape. Winston Smith embodies the tragic figure of an individual driven by the inner longing for freedom, yet trapped in a society that completely suppresses that freedom. The way he fails in his resistance shows the brutal power of the totalitarian state and demonstrates that in a world like that of 1984, the individual has no chance against an invisible yet omnipotent control. In 1984, the government's control goes far beyond merely monitoring the behavior of the people. The party has established a sophisticated system to not only monitor the outward actions of citizens, but also to control their innermost thoughts and beliefs. A central tool used by the party to control the people is the artificial language, known as newspeak. Newspeak is a newly developed language specifically designed to limit the ways in which people can express themselves, thus preventing the development of subversive thoughts. The vocabulary of newspeak is continuously reduced so that fewer and fewer words are available to formulate critical or rebellious ideas. The power of this linguistic limitation is immense. If there are no words to express dissatisfaction or resistance, then no such thoughts can arise. The goal of newspeak is not just to silence the people, but to prevent them from even being able to think against the party. The thought police are another key institution of the party that ensures total control over the citizens. Their task is to monitor and punish any deviant, subversive, or unorthodox thoughts. Unlike in a normal society, where only actions are monitored and punished, in 1984, even mental freedom is suppressed. The party believes that thoughts are as dangerous as actions, and that controlling thoughts is even more crucial to maintaining absolute power. The term thought crime refers to any form of dissenting thought, and the thought police are constantly on the lookout for signs of such crimes. The system of the thought police is so effective because it keeps people in a constant state of fear, knowing that they could be watched at any moment, even in their most private thoughts. This constant surveillance leads to a state of self-censorship, where individuals control their thoughts and feelings at all times to avoid being guilty of a thought crime. In 1984, there is no privacy, not even in one's thoughts. It is not enough to appear outwardly loyal. One's innermost beliefs must align with the party's ideology. A single incorrect thought can lead to arrest, torture, and ultimately re-education. Through these methods, the linguistic manipulation of newspeak and the constant control of thoughts by the thought police, the party is able to crush any form of resistance before it even begins. They ensure that the people are not only physically submissive, but mentally compliant as well. The loss of freedom of expression and intellectual independence makes the system nearly impenetrable, highlighting the extreme danger of a totalitarian state that controls every aspect of its citizens' lives and thoughts. In 1984, the government is divided into 3 central ministries, each controlling a crucial aspect of society and reflecting the systematic machinery of the state. These ministries, with their paradoxical names and functions, serve as examples of the grotesque distortion of reality and the deception the party imposes on its citizens. Each of these ministries plays a role in maintaining the party's power and control by manipulating the perception of reality, legitimizing war and violence, and suppressing the people. The Ministry of Truth is one of the central tools of the party's control. It is responsible for manipulating the past, ensuring that all historical records are constantly changed to align with the current party line. The ministry distorts history, erases unwanted events, and invents new truths that serve the party's interests. By continuously reinventing the past, the ministry creates an alternate reality where the party appears infallible and omnipotent. Winston Smith, the protagonist, works in the Ministry of Truth and spends his days altering records to bring the historical truth in line with the political reality of the present. The ironic fact that the Ministry of Truth is an institution that consumes and manipulates the truth is yet another example of the absurd logic of the totalitarian regime in 1984. The Ministry of Peace is responsible for the conduct and management of wars. The name Ministry of Peace is a striking reversal of what it truly represents and another example of the paradoxical world in which the citizens live. The name sounds harmless and even reassuring, but in reality, it oversees the constant state of warfare and controls the country's foreign policy. The state fights continuous wars not to gain territory or achieve political goals, but to keep the economy running and maintain a state of constant threat and fear. War serves as a pretext to suppress the people, control their resources, and solidify the party's power. By keeping society in a perpetual state of emergency, the party is able to extend its dominance and suppress any form of resistance. The Ministry of Love is the institution most closely associated with the brutal and inhumane side of the regime. Despite its innocuous name, it is responsible for torture, surveillance, and the re-education of citizens who have opposed the party or developed unhealthy thoughts. It is the institution that supports the thought police and ensures that any form of resistance or subversion is violently suppressed. In this ministry, people like Winston are tortured to force total submission and loyalty to the party. The name, Ministry of Love, is a cynical joke, masking the extreme violence and totalitarian practices of the ministry and highlighting the tragic distortion of the term love in a world of fear and control. The existence of these three ministries demonstrates how the totalitarian regime in 1984 manipulates language and symbols to conceal the true nature of the power structure. Each ministry, though named after concepts like prosperity, peace, and love, actually represents the opposite: deception, violence, and oppression. This systematic distortion of meaning and the creation of institutions designed to control and break the people is a central feature of the dystopian world Orwell presents in his work. In 1984, the state is in a constant state of war, not as a means of conquest or securing resources, but as a permanent strategy to keep society in a state of fear and control. The war serves primarily to occupy the people's attention and direct their energy towards external threats, rather than internal issues and the failings of the state. In the world of 1984, war is an unending condition, presented to the citizens as a necessary evil to maintain unity and legitimize the party's power. The ongoing state of war has a dual function. It creates a sense of threat, which allows the party to unite the population, and it keeps the people in a continuous state of emergency, significantly restricting their ability to think critically and resist. Propaganda plays a central role in maintaining this war state and the control associated with it. The party uses media and other communication channels to disseminate a constant flood of information, reinforcing the belief in the war and the need for perpetual engagement with the state's enemies. Enemy images are deliberately constructed and maintained to push the population into a form of groupthink that suppresses any opposition to the party or its warmongering government. These enemy images are often not just exaggerated or fabricated, but are frequently fluid, which makes the entire conduct of the war and the propaganda even more cynical. The party claims that the enemy constantly changes, allowing it to maintain control over the perception of the citizens and distract them from the true issues facing the country. A prominent example of this tactic is the constant shifting of the enemy images in international politics, with the party regularly redefining its enemies and forcing the population to hate them and intensify their support for the war efforts. In 1984, there are three perpetual warring factions: Oceania, Eurasia, and Eastasia. But the enemy is constantly changing, so the party can always claim to be at war with one of the other states. This ensures that the people are never able to recognize the true causes of the war or question its motives. The constant enemy creates a simple and manipulative narrative in which the party appears to be the only force capable of protecting the nation from destruction by the enemy. At the same time, the war distracts attention from the internal problems plaguing the country: economic issues, poverty, and the unimaginable oppression by the government. The continuous warfare and accompanying propaganda obscure the fact that the true suffering of the population is caused by the party itself. The citizens of 1984 are so embroiled in the war that they cannot critically question the social conditions or the state's oppressive actions. Furthermore, the propaganda is also used to educate and indoctrinate the population. It entertains and strengthens the state's ideology, fostering the belief that war is an inescapable part of life that allows no opposition. Slogans like "War is Peace," seen in 1984, reflect the absurd and contradictory logic of the government, which portrays war as peaceful and thus distorts the perception of reality. This perpetual war and its associated propaganda are not just tools of foreign policy, but essential instruments for maintaining control over domestic politics and the daily lives of the people. The constant reminder of Big Brother leads to a state of perpetual fear and insecurity. Every citizen is aware that they may be watched at any given moment, and this idea paralyzes their thinking and actions. The notion that someone could be monitoring their every move, word, and even thought creates an atmosphere of constant self-censorship. There is no relaxation, no freedom, no ability to exist in any area of life without the feeling of being observed. This causes people to continuously adjust their behavior for fear of violating the party's rules or, even worse, harboring suspicious thoughts. Big Brother's presence also intensifies the people's sense of powerlessness. Since he is portrayed as an infallible figure, it is nearly impossible for the people to rebel against him or the system he represents. Big Brother stands for the unquestionable authority of the party, which rules with an iron fist, and the notion that he is always watching them conveys the idea of all-encompassing control, from which no one can escape. In the society of 1984, this means that any attempt to resist or show disobedience is immediately punished, either by the thought police or through other forms of state repression. This omnipresent surveillance by Big Brother leaves no room for privacy or individual freedom. The citizens live in constant anxiety, knowing that their behavior and thoughts may be scrutinized at any time by the party. Their perception of reality itself is affected by Big Brother's continual presence, as they are constantly reminded that they are part of a system that controls and manipulates their entire existence. The idea of Big Brother as an all-seeing protector and guardian of the people from external and internal dangers is, in truth, a sophisticated mechanism for maintaining total control by the party. Through this all-encompassing presence, Big Brother becomes not only a symbol of the government, but also a constant threat in the life of every individual. He embodies the relentless pressure placed on the citizens to monitor and control their own thoughts and actions, leading to a state of mental and emotional exhaustion. The slogan "Big Brother is watching you" becomes a psychological tool that forces people to question their own perceptions and reality, as they know they are never truly safe from being watched. In 1984, the protagonist Winston Smith begins to fight against the all-encompassing control of the party. His first step toward rebellion may seem inconspicuous, but for the totalitarian regime, it is a serious act of defiance. He starts keeping a journal. In a society where every form of personal freedom and independence is monitored and suppressed, keeping a journal represents a direct challenge to the party. Winston uses the journal to record his forbidden thoughts, to escape the constant indoctrination, and to document how he perceives the world around him. This act is not only a rebellion, but also a way for him to preserve his internal resistance against the party and its manipulations. In a world where the truth is constantly altered and the past is rewritten at will, the journal offers Winston a moment of truth and his own, untainted perception. Alongside his journal, Winston begins a forbidden love affair with Julia, a colleague from the Ministry of Truth. Julia, too, is disillusioned with the party, but her reasons for rebellion and her way of opposing the system are more pragmatic and motivated by personal defiance, unlike Winston's deeper philosophical rejection of the regime. Their relationship becomes a form of self-liberation for both of them. In a society where personal freedom, especially sexual freedom, is completely controlled by the party, their affair is a radical act of rebellion. By uniting in this way, they present a threat to the state through their intimacy and shared resistance. Winston's path to rebellion also leads him to O'Brien, a high-ranking member of the party, whom he believes to be a secret member of the resistance. Winston sees O'Brien as a potential source of support and hope, thinking that there may be a movement against the party. O'Brien acts as a mentor and speaks to Winston about the possibility of revolutionary resistance, giving Winston hope. However, O'Brien is, in fact, a loyal member of the party, and his contact with Winston ultimately leads to his betrayal and torture. O'Brien uses Winston's trust to expose him, and Winston is taken to the Ministry of Love, where he is tortured into renouncing his beliefs and pledging loyalty to the party. Despite his initial efforts to resist, through keeping a journal, engaging in a forbidden relationship, and the perceived collaboration with a fellow resistance member, Winston's rebellion ultimately fails. In 1984, Orwell's depiction of resistance illustrates the futility of opposition in a society that completely controls the thoughts and actions of its citizens. Winston may fight against the system, but the party's all-encompassing power and constant surveillance, combined with psychological manipulation, make genuine resistance almost impossible. The novel bleakly shows how a totalitarian control system quashes any form of dissent, and that true resistance against such a power would only be possible if there were an entirely different societal structure in place. In 1984, the final twist of the story is represented by Winston Smith's tragic and painful downfall. After attempting several acts of resistance against the party, including keeping a journal and having a forbidden affair with Julia, Winston is eventually captured by the thought police. In a society where any deviation from the party's ideology is considered a thought crime, it is inevitable that Winston will be held accountable for his subversive thoughts and actions. The thought police, acting as an omnipresent surveillance force, not only target political dissidents, but also monitor the psyche of the citizens, controlling and punishing their thoughts. Winston is taken to the Ministry of Love, ironically named, as it is responsible for torture and brainwashing. There, he is systematically broken. The torture is both physical and psychological, and Winston is not only subjected to physical pain, but also to intense psychological manipulation. A pivotal moment in his destruction occurs when he is tortured by O'Brien, who he believed to be a member of the resistance. However, O'Brien is, in fact, a loyal party member, and his role in Winston's re-education is central. Throughout the process, Winston is forced to accept the party's truths and ultimately betray his deepest convictions. A key moment in this breaking phase is Winston's forced acceptance of 2 and 2 equals 5, a symbolic act where he is made to fight against his own perception of reality and accept the party line, even though he knows it is not true. This highlights the totalitarian mechanism of the party, which not only gains control over people's behavior, but also over their perception of objective reality. In the final act of his destruction, Winston is forced to completely deny his love for Julia and his resistance to the party. He becomes a compliant follower of Big Brother, the symbolic leader of the regime, and develops an unconditional reverence for him. Winston's emotional and mental destruction is complete, and he becomes just another blind supporter of the party, the very force he had once fought against. In the end, he not only accepts the party's rule, but also believes that Big Brother is always right, and his rebellion turns into an inner capitulation. This final twist underscores Orwell's grim vision of a totalitarian society in which resistance and individual freedom are ultimately impossible. Through the brutal manipulation of Winston's mind and the complete destruction of his identity, Orwell illustrates how a totalitarian government can eradicate independent thought and human dignity within such a society. Winston's final acceptance is a shocking and tragic end that highlights the party's total power and its ability to control the individual to an extreme degree. 1984 addresses a variety of deep and disturbingly relevant themes, highlighting the dangers of a totalitarian regime and its effects on the individual. One of the central themes is surveillance. In the world of 1984, surveillance is omnipresent and an essential tool for the party's power. The government uses advanced technology to monitor citizens continuously and control every aspect of their lives. Televisions, which are used not only for propaganda but also for surveillance, are present everywhere. Even in their own homes, there is no safety, as the state observes the people in the most intimate aspects of their lives. This surveillance serves not just for physical control, but also for mental manipulation, destroying any sense of privacy or freedom. Another central theme is total control. In the society of 1984, the state has absolute control over every aspect of citizens' lives. The government dictates what people are allowed to think, say, and do. There is no freedom of expression or action. The state possesses the power to control reality itself by constantly rewriting the past to support the present party line. The Ministry of Truth is responsible for manipulating historical documents and shaping reality to align with the party's ideology. Citizens live in a constant state of fear and ignorance, as they never know what is true. The manipulation of truth is another important theme in 1984. The party holds a monopoly on truth, and its version of reality is the only one that matters. This manipulation of truth happens through the continuous rewriting of history, so that any evidence or memory of the past is erased. Another element of this manipulation is the creation of the language newspeak, an artificially constructed language designed to reduce vocabulary and eliminate the possibility of subversive thought. By destroying language, the scope for free thinking is systematically reduced. The destruction of individual freedom is another key theme. In 1984, there is no real personal freedom left. People are completely subjected to the party's control. Their thoughts, their actions, their relationships. Everything is monitored and dictated by the state. The loss of personal freedom extends so far that the individual self-censors, unable to freely express even their own thoughts. The constant surveillance creates an atmosphere of fear and mistrust that turns people into puppets of the state. The loss of personal identity is the tragic end for many of the characters in 1984, especially Winston Smith. Through unceasing brainwashing, constant torture, and the destruction of any form of resistance, Winston is reduced to a shell of a person. The destruction of his individuality is the ultimate goal of the party, and it succeeds when he ultimately accepts the party's totalitarian rule and develops an unconditional admiration for Big Brother. This loss of personal identity and personal conviction symbolizes the complete destruction of the human spirit under a totalitarian regime. In summary, 1984 powerfully addresses the themes of surveillance, control, manipulation of truth, the loss of individual freedom, and the destruction of personal identity. These themes are not only a warning about the dangers of a totalitarian state, but also a profound reflection on the effects of power on the individual and society. George Orwell urges readers to appreciate the value of freedom and independent thought, and to remain vigilant of the dangers of propaganda and total control, which, as the book demonstrates, can undermine the foundation of a free society.